Go for liftoff in T-minus 30.
Minnesota Black Robe Regiment. Some of you, many of you have seen his videos.
I'm just going to enjoy this.
And this guy tells it like it is. He puts me to shame. And he is very active in liberties and freedoms and doing a whole lot for a whole lot of people. TC has been instrumental very much in my life. He came to our very first protest.
January 4th, I was here with you, and then on the 29th. And the 29th is the last time I've been in this building. I wasn't here on the 1st.
You were not here on the first, okay. So TC has been over here many times. He's not here, doesn't live right here in the area. I won't divulge where he lives.
No, I don't care. I live in Spring Valley.
So he's been here and has helped with several different, how would you say, you've helped us out with a lot of different issues, yes. And
I wanted to tell her story.
yeah, so
Nobody else was, so.
Thanks for that. He really opened up a Pandora's box, let me tell you.
Oh boy.
It was a Pandora's box that actually needed to be opened. So he's the one, if you've seen the video about Kelly Dawn Martinez, that's TC's story. And there's a whole lot of other videos that you guys should take a look at.
You haven't seen it? You can't be here. Okay. That was a joke. No, that's like a
TC.
You got a steady hand, right?
No. I'll do my best. Where am I?
Just point it in the jet unless you feel like you have to.
I can't see what's on the screen.
There is nothing to see. It's the GoPro. It doesn't show anything.
So I do have the better version then.
By accident.
I know.
How many of you?
Okay, let me just say this. It's 7:30. I took 15 minutes of your time, so you're done. No, I'm joking. But so TC's going to do about 15 minutes of training, and then he's going to do a Q&A.
So it's going to start as training Q&A. How many of you have seen any of my stuff? How many of you had no idea who I was when you walked in here tonight? No idea.
Ever.
All right. Peterson, you're fired. How many of you are here? How many of you, this is the first time here? All right.
Awesome.
Yeah, well, thank you.
Yeah.
How many of you tried try the coffee before I leave? There you go. The reason I ask that is the common theme of what's happening is people are waking up. And let's be honest, the school boards especially right now are getting a lot of heat, and rightly so. They deserve to be protested. They deserve to be rallied against, if you will. I had my own beef with some of the stuff that was happening in Albert Lee back when I saw what was happening to Lisa. In fact, the last time I was actually here, I've been in Albert Lee since, but the last time I was actually here in this building was January 29th, the night of Lisa's nail walls to the wall protest. And there were some things that took place that night that have subsequently led me to being gone for so long. And quite frankly, it's because of my activities and speaking out. I had, honestly, and Lisa knows this, very great concern that that things would be trumped up against me to try and run me out of town, or at best, if not literally haul me away. So I have to get out of town before they figure out I'm here, by the way. So, and that leads me to the events of last Thursday, right? Thursday evening, afternoon. For one, seriously, for those of you that have never done that before, you inspire me. That is massive.
You inspired us.
Yeah, that's right.
No, she did. She did it by doing this.
We did it. We all did it together.
Yep.
Lisa did that by doing what she's been doing. All I'm doing is telling stories. I'm telling people stories, and I'm talking about the things I'm seeing. and Lisa's inspiring people, but you guys inspire me because it's nice to see it coming from a groundswell of a grassroots movement of people saying it's time that we are the people.
Yes.
We the people, right? So that being said, one, I apologize. I was a little harder on you guys in my original video than I probably should have been. Just because in my emotional response to what was said to you, I read through the law way too fast. I found the law immediately based on the language they were using. I found the law that they were referring to, or the statute, excuse me, the state statute, but I read it way too fast and made my commentary based off of that. So my apologies on that part. The other thing, but the part that I'm going to be speaking to tonight especially is the reality that when we do these things, we have to have prepared, and I know you did because Sherry pointed out, like, we're going to be doing this, we're going to be, and some others had reached out and said we're going to be doing these things. But there's more to preparation than talking about doing it and even saying, hey, let's get here together at 2:30 or 3 o'clock. Part of preparation is understanding the situation that you're walking into and knowing how you're going to respond to those things. So how many of you, that was the first time that you'd ever been approached by a member of the law enforcement community other than to say hi to them or like a simple traffic stop? Honest.
Well, nobody approached me.
Yeah, nobody approached
Nobody
No,
approached me.
but did anybody from so administration, law enforcement didn't talk to you?
No, Sue and I approached them.
You approached law
We
enforcement?
approached the officer.
Okay, so it was after the fact.
Yeah.
Okay, I wanted to make sure I understand that. So administration, somebody from the administration approached you and told you that it was unlawful for you to be there during school day.
No,
I'm the one that pulled in the driveway and they came up to my computer.
You terrorist.
I am.
Tongue in cheek.
Yes. And they wanted to know what my business was at the school.
Anytime you are, and this is where the training aspect of it comes in, anytime you are approached by a public servant, you don't need to throw that out there right away, by the way. That is not a good way to start off the conversation. But anytime that you are approached by a public servant, be they elected or appointed or hired, however you want to say it.
How do you know?
Well, they had better identify themselves. If a person comes up to you on a public ground and says, whether it's a school, a city hall, a county property, whatever the case might be, if they come up to you and say, hey, you can't, the first thing that you should say is, under what authority are you addressing me this way? Does that make sense? Because if some Joe Schmo is just walking by and doesn't like what you're doing and says to you, oh, you can't be out here doing this, and you say, well, who are you? What authority do you have? What's the source of your authority? And then, well, I just don't think you should be doing this. Okay, thanks, have a great day.
well, wouldn't it be now, you said like a public servant, which law enforcement they are?
Right, but so are principals and superintendents and any
Right,
member of the
right.
administration.
But I mean, a law enforcement, I would be hesitant to say
Why?
by what authority.
Can I
Okay, then.
can I call you Nikki? Nikki?
Yes.
Okay.
Miss Nikki.
Ms. Nikki. Why? Why would you be hesitant to ask that?
Well, for one thing.
I
it's
told you
kind-
it's gonna be more
Well,
questionable.
it's kind of apparent by the uniform,
So,
as if it was just somebody standing there.
so
I don't know, I
let's-
come from the
so-
perspective, I worked as a corrections officer at a women's prison,
Okay.
and,
Are you a criminal?
no,
Is a person who's arrested, been run through the legal system, tried and convicted and sentenced, sitting in a women's prison, are they a criminal? Right.
by
yeah.
law, yes,
Yeah, right. Are they doing time?
yes,
Do you have authority over them in that situation because of the position you've been appointed to, the oath that you've taken, and the fact that they've been convicted? Absolutely.
for
There-
public safety and.
Right. And so unless you're asking the person in that situation to do something completely asinine and off the wall, they don't have a right to question you. However, when you are in public, and this is going forward for all of this, in public, going forward, if a law enforcement officer of any kind, or any person who claims to be part of any public sector, and we have to stop using the language officials. They love it when we use that language.
Or experts.
They love it when we say, oh, they're a public official, they're an elected official, they're a school, they're not officials. That's a modern understanding. They are not officials, unless you work for them. So if you work for the police department, then the chief is an official over you. But guess what? When any member of the police department or the sheriff's office approaches you, they're not officials over you. And they had better have a reason to be telling you why you cannot do what you're doing. And it has to be grounded in truth, and it has to be grounded in justice. Does that make sense? Seriously, like this is going to be less question and answer, or less training and more question and answer, because I'm going to ask a lot of questions which are going to make you want to ask the questions. You're driving down the road, lights come on behind you, should you just keep driving?
No.
No. Because it may not be for you, but you should still pull over so they can get by you. Because if you don't pull over so they can get by you, you're still going to get pulled over, right? Right? But if that vehicle pulls up behind you and those lights come on, what's the pull over at a reasonable time in a safe and orderly fashion, correct? Now the first response when they get up to the window should not be, hey, you're a public servant, what reason do you have to pull me over? That's not, but there's a time and place, right? Absolutely. Now, should they, and this is kind of plays into where I'm going with it. If they come up to you and they say, Val, right? I'm reading that right? Glasses are doing it. Glasses are doing it. Val, do you know why I pulled you over? Well, you don't go, well, I know I was doing 15 miles an hour over the speed limit. No. Could you tell me? That's perfectly fine. Now, you're out having a protest or a rally, and somebody approaches you and says, you can't do this. What grounds and what authority do you have to tell me I cannot do this? It sounds confrontational, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. How many of you right now, when I say that, are going, I want to see your hands, because I want you to be honest. How many of you right now are going, I can't do that? Please, honestly, raise your hand. It's nerve-wracking.
I could do it, but I can see other things happening.
But why? What's your name?
Jessica.
Jessica, why, what other things do you think could happen?
Because they're, having worked as a correctional officer myself, have seen the error, like, of people, certain individuals that work in law enforcement, how they sometimes, not all, put towards
trust me.
that, yeah, the error that they put towards themselves, that if you question them, then they get a little bit harder to be like, you know, you're going against me, and not, they put their power. There are, you know, that's just not as true.
Sure.
Because I've had it where I've been pulled over and I'm like, how can I help you? And they look at me, well, I'm okay, but if I say it to just everyone, they're not going to respond.
Jessica?
Yes.
Okay. Next time you get pulled over, which I hope isn't real soon.
Wow.
The next time you get pulled over, please don't say, how can I help you?
Well,
Maybe have your license, your registration, and your insurance ready, hands on the wheel, but please don't go, how can I help you?
Because they were following us thinking I was drunk and I'm not. That's when I'm like, how can I help you? I didn't get a ticket.
If they're not, anybody, uniform or not in uniform, if they come up and approach you and tell you that you cannot be doing something, I want to know who you are. And if they are in uniform, and this is the part that's going to be, after I say this, the part's going to be really difficult for some of you. We're going to get there, and I'm going to emphasize why. I'm going to probably sound really petty about it. It's very important. Ask them to identify themselves. Ask them for identification, not just identify yourself, ask them for identification. And so if it's a member of the school district and it's somebody in the administration, I want to know who you are, and I want to know why you're approaching me and what authority, because I keep emphasizing it, right? And any of you churchgoers, let's the Bible do all the time. When Jesus or somebody else in the Bible wants to learn something, they do it how many times? 3 or 4 times minimum, right? Maybe in different ways, but it's always the same message every time it's asked or stated. And so I keep repeating this because it's incredibly important. Who are you? What authority? And what have I done? Right? And I need you to cite it. Don't go, well, there's a statute, or there's a rule, or school policy. Well, right there, if it's at the school, let's just use that example. School policy does not have any effect on you. It only affects what's going inside of that school. It has no authority over you. until you try to walk up to that building and get in for no good reason, which is that state statute. And if you're trying to get up on the roof, I don't know, if you're trying to get up on the roof, I don't know.
I was trying to get I'll get you
So here's the next part. There again, in any of these situations, whether we go down to City Hall or we go down to the county government center, right? Whether it's those buildings are your buildings. City Hall is your building. The school district is your building. Now there are going to be certain things in place for the safety, especially at schools, for kids. And there is a reason why it's unlawful for you to enter the school building or get on the roof. I don't even want to know what that looks like, honestly. So, but for the safety of the kids and to cut down on distractions inside of the school or right up on the building, okay? And there can be there's a time and place. Like if you show up down at the adult detention center here in Freeborn County and you're trying to scale the wall, whatever happens to you at that point, I don't know you. You brought that on yourself. But I want you to understand that there is a time and place. You know, so is the First Amendment broad? Absolutely. Does the First Amendment allow you I hate using the term rights. There's a liberty that's enshrined in the First Amendment that says you can protest the government. Governments, the elected and appointed and hired servants. And even if you don't do this, but even if you write something you shouldn't write on a sign, they can't stop you. Now, there are certain things you can't do. Calls for actual violence, right? None of you were doing that. Calls for which would fall into the violence aspect. Doing property damage, not just calling for it, is going beyond. So there are time and place constraints and activity constraints to some degree. However, what you guys were doing last week didn't fall into any of that. Now, how do we prove that? Like I said, this is where it's going to get very heavy. And this is where you have to understand why I'm saying this. So if this comes off as sharp, I don't want it to come off as sharp. But how can any of you prove the opposite of what Funk got out there before you got out there? Can any of you disprove what Funk said?
Unfortunately, my main issue was the statement about as the kids were leaving, and we all dispersed before that, but unfortunately,
Prove it, Nikki.
unfortunately, they didn't take it.
Okay, listen to what I'm saying. You all can prove it by testimony, but what's that gonna, can you prove it to the public?
Well, the picture that was taken of all the protesters, no vehicles or children anywhere around.
Right. But I could take a picture of this group right now, and if I did it just right, I could take it at an angle to make it look like there were 150 people in here. Or I could take that picture at an angle where it looked like there was only 5 people here. Right? Like right now, the way Lisa's holding the camera, pointing at me, it's gonna look like there's 1, 2, 3, 4 of you here watching besides the person holding the camera and me. So this could very easily be portrayed as, oh, there are, how many ever we have here? I don't count.
My thought, my thought would be, and he hasn't responded yet, if he holds any weight, he's the school resource officer. He was there throughout the entire thing and never told us to disperse, never.
And what I'm gonna tell you right now is, it's not about Herman, Officer Herman.
Who
No,
has
but I'm
ever
just saying
trusted
as
a
a
police
witness.
officer, to be honest?
Huh?
Who's ever trusted a police officer?
No,
Let's be honest.
Sherry, I appreciate what you're saying, but that's actually not, this is gonna come off as hard, so don't unfriend me on Facebook. Wait till like next week, when I'm not paying attention. That's an unfair statement, because the vast majority of the officers are honestly there to do their job and try to do it well.
I'm not saying they don't.
Right. But when you say, who trusts an officer to be honest? You do. And you have to, but you have to hold them accountable, and this is where I'm going, so bear with me. Look at the video, self-promotion here. Look at the video that Lisa turned over to me, that I initially did the commentary on from back in January, when the panic alarm was pushed, And all those officers came in, every single one of them came in very similarly. Could have gone far differently considering it was a panic alarm push. Her son could have very easily ended up dead in that situation when he turned around with a camera in his hand. But the officer, one of which, if I remember correctly, from previous reports, is actually one of the officers involved with the most recent lethal use of force in the area. And I may not be 100% positive, so that's not a statement of fact, it's just what I've been told. But they conducted themselves very well. And actually Officer Herman was there that day as well.
Yeah.
And the response when Lisa went out and said, did I really need all of this? And the response was, no, not really. And Lisa says, well, what happened? Well, somebody may have accidentally pushed a panic alarm. Well, what do we, and this is, there again, where I'm going. I know I take a while to get there, but get this, I always build up to what I'm going to say. Why do we know that's not what happened? Because there was video. Right? And we know that there was video because Lisa's son shot it and got it to me, and we got it out there. Now, guess what the rumor was about what happened that day after the videos got taken down, because my former employer, Jones State County Sheriff's Office Sheriff Kevin Torgerson, ordered me to take them down because it was damning to Kelly Dawn. Say it with me,
Kelly Dawn Martinez.
Guess what the rumor became then at that point, because there was no video to prove it in their eyes? That Lisa gained unlawful entry to that building.
Oh, geez.
Seriously?
Yeah, that was used against me in their in their persecution against me. That was what was used against me. How do we know that's not what happened? Because we have the video. So, hard point. Every single one of you, I don't care if you're 15, 20, 45, 55, 65, 75, you better learn how to use your smartphone or get a GoPro or something, and every single one of you on site at any of those from now on, and this is not optional, you have to record. Because if you do not record, all of you, they're going to find the person who is recording, especially if it's the administration, and they're going to target you. Why? Because if they can get that camera or that phone out of your hands, then they can make sure that none of that exists. Now, the law enforcement officers aren't going to respond that way because they're recording too, right? Which is why I think every single person in the school district should be wearing body camera from now on. Teachers, everybody, in a classroom all the time.
What about the email that we sent out? Is that any, because we, or the call to action and the email that we sent out on there.
Before the event.
Before the event, alerting everybody, you know, to be there and everything, and this is, what is
Civil.
Civil, we're not there to,
Sure.
Yeah, I mean,
Sure,
that
great email. Doesn't prove anything. Doesn't prove that you were there.
proves our intention.
Does it?
Prove that you carried it out.
I'm not trying to be a smart aleck, but what you have to understand is when you have somebody like Funky Funk.
Yeah.
I have a hard time not picking on that, by the way. It's just so easy for alliteration purposes. When he gets, I mean, how fast did he have that ready to go? I mean, that was out
Within an hour of.
within an hour. Now, what do you know? We already know that somebody called the school and told them it was coming. Because they did what? They chained parking lot, correct?
It was way back at like 2 o'clock or something. I had driven by and it was already chained up.
They chained the parking lot. That email, or that statement, that paragraph statement, which by the way, I don't know this, but it sure does look like it was pre-written.
Yeah.
And probably pre-written by the person who quoted the superintendent.
Right.
And the person who said the quote. That email, that first of all, that article was pre-written for publication immediately upon the closure of the event. Why? To paint every single one of you as a radical. Now, my understanding is that was one of you was out there with the walker.
Amen.
So I'm gonna go. I don't know what you put in your walker.
Me neither.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It was mostly women.
Yeah.
And Keith, and if he wears the right shoes and pants, good pass. And that's for you, Keith.
100%.
But it was mostly women, and not that women can't be radical, because obviously we have seen that happen in certain situations, Minneapolis and Portland and everywhere else. But well-maintained women of age over 20.
I was probably the youngest, and I'm almost 50.
So
So-
Sherry, I don't want that on video, okay? Because I don't want it coming out that I was attacking anybody for their age. But my point is, we have a lot of mature people with solid heads on their shoulders who've never done this before, are now being painted out to be severe radicals, and the town is coming unglued. Like, we can't get them to give a hoot about what J.D. Carlson and Kelly Don Martinez and the Albert Lee City Council and the mayor of Albert Lee have done to Lisa Hanson. But boy, one email and one published article on the Albert Lee area high school website, and you guys are all monsters. Why? Because you don't have any video evidence to demonstrate otherwise.
I was on my way, I swear.
And that's
I
not,
was gonna video it.
Well,
I think I'm a kid.
Jessica, that's not, and this is gonna like sound heavy. That's not your fault.
I know.
But this is where you guys, because you're not used to thinking like this.
I didn't know.
You're right. You didn't know, but you did, because look at the world for the last year and a half.
Yeah, I know.
Right? And I know this is really hard, and I'm not trying to pick on you. I'm not, honestly, because I'm going to get emotional here. I'm like, I get it.
So
Because we don't think that way, because we have this part of us, whether we're Christian or marginally Christian or not Christian at all, we're Minnesota. And we want to think better of the people around us than that.
So basically, at this point, it's a he said, she said thing.
No,
They're saying,
at this point, you guys cannot win this
Yeah,
fight
that's
with him at
yeah.
all. It's not even he said, she said.
Okay.
It's the school officials have
Yeah.
stated that this is what happened, so we're going to believe them. And that's why, and I'll tell you, I talked to Lisa. In my eyes, you got, you made mistakes. We do that, okay? We do that. Every single one of us, whether we have a camera with us or not, we make mistakes. But how do we go forward in a movement like this of constitutionalists are trying to take back their government? We are a government of the people, come on,
For the people, by the people.
How do we take that back without learning from our mistakes? Right? The only way to do that is not give up. When you see that article, the first thing that happens, it makes you mad. That's not what I did. I didn't do that. You want to defend yourself, right? It takes time. Gotta wait. Trust me, I know how hard that is. I've been waiting since February 19th of this year to start defending myself. Lisa knows what I'm talking about.
So are you suggesting that we don't go forth to the school board meeting and voice
No,
our
that's not
opinions
at all what I'm saying.
civilly? Okay,
One, you gotta remember, you get 5 people for 2 minutes.
yeah, I know.
And if you're not there, what time's the meeting start?
5 o'clock.
If you're not there at 4:30, they're gonna have that agenda packed, and they're gonna have other people in there lined up to speak before you. They will do that. Okay, I'm sorry. I don't care if any of you do business with, I don't know what his first name is, Clatter, whatever his name is. I almost said something I shouldn't have. I'm sorry. Whatever his last name is, I don't care if you do business with him or not. You might want to like risk not doing business with him because he is not watching out for you.
Switch over to Randy, I did. I switched all my stuff over after I ran into class.
So, because he is, look at what he did to Lisa. And if you haven't watched, I did a breakdown of exactly what he did with Lisa by time. Yes, Sherry.
Who is that guy?
School board chair. Okay? They will do their level best to make sure that you do not come in there and talk about this situation.
So be there by 4:30?
You bet. Yeah, be there by 4:30 and ready to go and sign up, because you guys need to pack the number of people speaking. You need to be the first 5 signed up.
There's 2 sign-up sheets. You do not have to sign in, but you do have to sign up to speak in the open forum.
And
And
there's
it-
two sign-up
There's
sheets.
2 sign-up sheets, just sign into the open forum sheet.
Sign into the open form, yeah, sign into the open form sheet, make sure that you do that.
I wonder what the earliest time is when you can go there to sign up.
And I don't care if the earliest time is 4:50, you need to be there at 4:30 at the door in a group.
Angie Hoffman has said that the door is open at 4:30, maybe even before, so.
So and it needs to be in a group. It needs to be in a group.
And
And it needs,
And videotape.
And video.
and the second you walk out of your vehicles and approach that building,
Turn your phone on.
have your cameras on and let them know you're doing it. You don't need to be surreptitious about it. You don't need to act and hide like, oh, I better not let them know. Let them know. Let them know. I'm surprised that Clack acted the way he did towards Lisa, knowing there was somebody in that room shooting video. Excuse the terminology, but that's balls right there. To treat Lisa the way he did. And he's demonstrated this behavior before in just the last few months, because look at what he did to Angie Hoffman. I don't know these people, and this Jill. Look at what he did to them by dressing them down in a school board meeting. Now, who's in charge in that situation?
He is.
No. Who's supposed to be? Let me ask. Who's supposed to be in charge? No. No. The school board's supposed to be in charge. So when Angie and Jill address that superintendent, it should be yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, thank you, ma'am, or at very least, Jill, let me ask a clarifying question. That's not what he did. And that or not the super
Chair.
The chair sat there and let that superintendent run roughshod over elected servants who hold him accountable. And then what did he do after that meeting? After he belittled them, he turned around and made an arbitrary unilateral decision after they voted it down. After he told them they couldn't do it. So, and this may not sound germane to what we're dealing with, but it is absolutely germane. No integrity, no real ethics, and no understanding of who he works for. So do not tell me that he isn't more dangerous than J.D. Carlson. Because what happens the next time if you show up and you're not prepared? It'll be you're going to get trespassed. And that's why things like, and I'll type this out and send it to Lisa and she can give it to you. I've done open air preaching on college campuses and in public down in Lanesboro and stuff. And so I keep this card with me, but it's applicable to people who are protesting because you're all exercising your First Amendment liberties, right? There are certain things that you can do, like who is restricting me? So you got a complaint, so what? Who's restricting me? What's your capacity? What are you restricting? Is it where I'm at? Is it what I'm saying? Is it where I'm at and what I'm saying? Is it the time? What speech is being restricted? What activity that I'm actually doing are you actually restricting? Why are you restricting me? And like I said, I'll type all this up, but see, these are things that you have to start thinking about. When am I restricted from doing this? What did the school administration representative tell you? Can't do it during school hours. Well, what am I supposed to do? Because if I don't do it during school hours, like the school administration's not here to see it, so what good does it do? Right? Right? And that's why I had to, backtrack, and I put the apology out today. Not the phone. He doesn't deserve it. But to you guys, is that I should have thought through it more. Like, well, if I'm only allowed to protest or rally or whatever and have a sign at the school outside of school hours, no one's going to see it, except for the randos who are driving by or getting off work at Mrs. Jerry's.
Right.
And they're over there going, what are those freaks doing? They see the signs and they're like, yeah, no mask. And then they go put their mask on. But, and so how am I restricted? And this is a very pertinent question. Like I said, you guys, I'll get this to Lisa and she can get you copies of it. How am I restricted? And this is why this is important. What statute, what law, what code restricts me? And if they cite anything that says, well, you can't because, and it's not actually a crime, that's a First Amendment violation. And here's why this is important. and this is why recording, it's going to keep coming back to this all the time. This is why recording is so important. When any public servant at all, elected, appointed, or hired, goes into that position, they're protected by the term that sounds really scary if you think about it in terms of law enforcement, right? And you guys have heard this a lot since George Floyd died. And they're protected by immunity of sorts, right? And it's, every state has a little bit of a different term for it, but it's called qualified immunity most of the time. And what qualified immunity states is that if they are in the scope of their job in good faith, exercising their duties according to policy and procedure as they are trained, and not, this is key, and not violating your civil, human, and constitutional rights, you cannot sue them personally. So, if you get stopped on the side of the, and you get pulled over on the side of the road, and the cop asks you for an ID, and then you argue with him, and remember, Minnesota's an implied consent state. If you have a driver's license in Minnesota, that means the cop asks you to get out of the vehicle to do a field sobriety test, and you refuse, you can be arrested. And so then you fight with him, and then you get hurt, you can sue, but that cop's not going to lose anything, as long as he hasn't violated your rights, your freedoms, your liberties. The second they have violated your liberties, especially when it comes to the Constitution, guess what happens? Qualified immunity is stripped from them. Stripped from them. And even the bad courts normally rule that. Because they don't want to be seen defending someone who is violating your rights, whatever you want to say, human rights, civil rights, however you want to say it. They don't want to be seen as doing that. And that's why this recording stuff is so important in this day and age. Because the enemy, in this situation, the administration of the elderly area schools, in particular in this case, they are going to do everything in their power to make you guys look like radicals. So that the next time you show up there, instead of just having the driveway of the parking lot chained off, they're now going to, now, don't give them notice. So if you're in here, and this is not actually pointing at any one person, but if you're in here and you're that person who's going to go and notify the school of when this is happening, have fun. They're not going to get anywhere with it this time because y'all learn. So if that's you, when you're in this room, you're like, well, I can't take part in this. Okay, go tell the school, that's fine. Because you guys are educated and informed and ready to go. But now, they will call the school resource officer. He's going to look over and he's going to see a crowd of 10, 15, 20 people and he's going to be like, back up? Not because he's afraid that you're going to hurt him. He's not going to. Could you get the chief down here? Or could you get the sergeant? Or could you get the lieutenant? Because who wants to deal with that, right? And that's why this is important. Go ahead.
I'm just going to say that we just recognize, we always try to, stay poignant with the time. It is 8:06, but who would like to stay longer and hear more from TC? Would you guys like to continue? Are you able
My
to?
son's over there going, I will pay you all to stop talking.
TC, are you able to stay a little longer and talk to us some more? Is that a hardship for you?
I'll give him another beer. No, I literally have to drive home, so I'll take care of that when I get home.
I'd like to add something to TC. With like with the protests and all that, with Mr. Funk coming out telling you guys that you
Well, it wasn't Funk.
or whoever it was, whoever the official was that came out and said that you guys were unjustified on where you were at on the property and everything. Every city, every township throughout this whole country has land maps. It shows you the public property, private property, everything. Before you go to do anything, I do First Amendment audits, if anybody knows what those are. I do the most, I don't know, comprehensive stuff between cops, between the public, and between business owners, and everything else in between. But you look up your land maps, it'll tell you exactly where you can be, where you can't. Most likely around the schools, you can go all the way up around the sidewalks. I did it over in Austin on Monday. I was up around the sidewalks, walking with signs. Cops came up, just watched me, that was it. I got over to Hormel because I have issues with them. Anyways, Hormel was another problem because according to the land maps, the roads that go around Hormel are city owned, city maintained, but it comes into a different jurisdiction because Hormel also partially pays for that.
Well,
So it's
and
considered
this is where,
an
this is,
easement.
yeah, this is where, if it is a public sidewalk, and when I mean public, like it is literally, so how many of you live in town? How many of you have a sidewalk in your front yard? How many of you mow on both sides of the sidewalk, right? Who owns that strip of land on the closest to the road?
The city.
Right, who owns the sidewalk? Whose job is it to maintain the other side of the sidewalk? The owner. Yeah. And if you don't maintain that, the city can do what? Fine you, right? But you can't make them pay. And if the sidewalk gets in disrepair, whose job is to fix it? Yours. Yeah. Okay, so, huh?
To pay for it.
You have to find somebody to pay for it, because if the city does it, then it's gonna cost you a lot more. But through assessments and whatnot. So let this sink in. The sidewalks, unless they are fully on, so like most people have what's referred to as a carriage walk from the main sidewalk, right? It's fancy. We call it the carriage walk in our house because our house is over 100 years old. A carriage walk. We're fancy. But that strip of that sidewalk that runs from your house to the sidewalk is yours. But it's your responsibility to maintain that property, but it's city property, which is why you can't kick somebody off of it. They can stand out there on that sidewalk and take video of your house all day long, and you can't do a darn thing about it, because it's public. The minute that moves onto your property, so let's say there's a sidewalk that runs along the road, the boulevard, right? And then there's another sidewalk further in. You better not go on that sidewalk. It's no different. Where did you guys park last week? This is Jerry's parking lot, right? Some of you, not all of you. Some of you just drove right on to the driveway and caused all this trouble.
I just left.
Like, you are the radical.
I am.
Insurrectionist.
And I was by myself, so I didn't get my camera out, I didn't know what to do.
No, now I'm just kidding.
And did they not let you drive out the other side? They
Heck
made
no,
you back
they
up
didn't.
into traffic.
Yeah,
Made her
they
back
made
up.
her yeah, Keith told me that story, and he goes, and then they made her back into traffic, which was far more dangerous for everybody, right?
So we were the ones causing problems.
And don't worry, Keith is going to get an earful about not recording too. I'm like, seriously, of all the people that could have been.
Keith wasn't there.
No,
Keith
no,
wasn't
Oh, I
there.
thought Keith, the way Keith was telling the story.
He wanted to be there, but he couldn't be there.
Okay,
No,
never
it was
mind.
just
It's all right,
us.
Keith. No, you're
I was gonna say, I didn't see him there.
right. So, man, it was literally all ladies.
Yeah.
There was
No, there was a
there
man.
was
There was
one gentleman there, yeah.
Oh, okay.
We don't know who he was.
There was an old man that came,
But you guys a lot of you parked at Mrs. Jerry's and then went over, right?
and my husband dropped me off.
They didn't go over, they stayed on Mrs. Jerry's side. They stayed on Mrs. Jerry's side. And Mrs. Jerry's came out and said, you can't park here.
Right.
Are they allowed to do that?
Yes.
As long as it's their parking lot, right? But what about that grassy, isn't that part of like an easement or
The
something, the
grassy
city?
I would tell you to stay away from trying to figure out in those moments if I can park in this easement because it belongs to the city or it belongs to the, because you might win that fight eventually, but we have to remember, and Lisa and I have talked about this with a lot of things, not just you guys, but just a ton of things. And that was one of our conversations after my first video came out. And she's a lot nicer about it than I would be in most situations. But we have to remember optics, right? We have to remember optics. So like when you watch one of TC's videos and he gets a little heated, he might say something that he shouldn't say. Most of the time, he'll later on say, I should have said that. It's about optics, right? And so, is there anything wrong with parking in a grassy area that belongs to the city? Do you want to be seen doing that? No, because how are they going to paint that, right? I mean, oh, look at them driving all over the grass and, and doing this and, rebels breaking, So here's the thing. Now, some of you aren't as ambulatory. Obviously, you had a walker, your husband had to drop you off and whatnot. But for those of you that are ambulatory, it might be a good idea to go out and scout the neighborhood around, find a city street that has public parking on it, park, and if you have to, like, walk a few blocks.
Find the birds.
Well, we thought about having a couple of drivers, like going up to Hy-Vee would be about the best. Meet at Hy-Vee, have somebody bring us down and drop us off in designated
Which in and of
areas.
Yeah,
itself,
like a car lord.
which in and of itself is not necessarily a bad idea, until Hy-Vee catches on to these radicals are parking in their parking lot and then shuttling in.
Snyder Field parking lot, nobody's gonna be
Snyder
there.
Field parking lot, it's City Park.
Yeah,
or-
so if you got a city
Yeah.
park close by, can they stop you? No, and
No.
you can park in the parking lot and walk in the grass. So, with your signs. Now, is it a little bit more of an effort? Absolutely. Is it an effort that's worth taking?
Yes.
Absolutely. Is it a little uncomfortable figuring out how to use the camera on your phone the right way so that when you're holding it, it's not like bouncing back and forth and you're not portraiting a landscape or anything? Go ahead. Oh, I thought you were like waving over here. Hey, because that's what I look like when I'm trying to get all of that stuff is yeah, it's uncomfortable. And most of it's because most of us are from Minnesota. And most of us have lived our entire lives in this very go with the, not even shelter, but it's not necessarily a bad word, but some of it's just, I'm just going to go with the flow, right? I mean, how many of you, prior to all the stuff that's been happening lately, ever dreamed of going to a city council meeting? How many of you ever dreamed of going to a school board meeting?
I did. I did shock when I lived in Shakopee. I did to fight for a teacher. But
Right,
I mean,
but
as
it's-
far
it's-
an adversary.
Actually,
or-
well, it's not, see, and that's the other thing that we have to get over. It's not adversarial. Our, Lisa
It
and
feels
I,
like it now.
well, right, but who did that?
They did that.
They did that. And Lisa and I talked about this, and I may or may not have helped with one of her speeches lately. I'm not going to say for sure, but I may or may not have helped with one of those. And that's because I have time on my hands. And this is where, and I'm sure Lisa has said stuff like this before, but this is where we have to start to realize some of this is our fault. Funk is the way he is, one, because it's his personality. He's an egoist. Let's just be honest. I could hear it. I could hear it in his voice in the very first video that I watched where I couldn't see him. I could hear the ego and I could hear the anger.
Smug.
I could hear that, okay? But whose fault is that? He's responsible for his behavior, but whose fault is it that it's gotten to this point? Whose fault is it that Klott's gotten to the point where he feels like he has to let the superintendent walk all over him and walk all over other board members and walk all over Lisa? Why did Klott feel like it was okay for him to tell Lisa, I'm not going to allow that, and take up over a half a minute of her time chastising her and then saying, well, I'll give you 10 seconds back, which, by the way, she never did get her full time back. Why? There you go. So when I ask whose fault is it, whose hand should be going up? So whose fault is it? Every single one of us. I know. I'm being mean.
And
No.
it just came back to this.
Yeah. It's
I was living in North Carolina until a few months back.
well, but it's your fault, North Carolina, then too. So you got you're at fault in North Carolina and in Minnesota.
Oh, no, Mary.
You should have known better than to say that.
Before that, I was in Iowa.
So TC, the other thing that I think is important to note, and I'll take responsibility for, is, you know, we last week or the week before, I guess it was the week before, we talked about this and we said we need to do a protest, and you know, I just kind of threw them out there. I said, you know, is anybody, I know, it was. We all got to own this, but I just want to say too, so I'm not taking the blame for, you know, what did or didn't happen.
It's like, this was not me.
But we need to do better about educating ourselves, and that's exactly what we're doing. That's what we're doing. I'm educating me, and you're here to educate yourself, Nikki, and TC's here to educate us. What?
Our role models were watching BLM and Antifa protests
Oh.
on here. That's where I would take.
Well, then you screwed up, because you did not. Because if that had been your tactic, they would have just let you into the school and given you the keys.
Wow. Yeah.
So,
So kudos to these guys for going out there and just do, you know, it reminds me of the first time I ever did anything, like opened up the restaurant against the governor's orders. And I said, I know what I'm doing. I researched this. And then about 2 months, 3 months later, it was like, I had no idea what I was doing.
Lisa's not gonna like it, I bring this up, but
But let me just say this before I didn't have any idea what I was doing, but would I have done it all over again? Yes, I would have, because it was the right thing to do.
And one of the things that Lisa and I have joked about this in the past, Lisa had no idea who I was. So when we tell you that we're friends, this has been a very rapid for her and Vern and I to be tight. We're close. I have no problem giving Vern a hug and telling him I love him, calling him brother, and same thing with Lisa. And apart from this, if we were
Except
to sit
I'd
down and
prefer if
have
you
a-
call me sister.
I have to.
I'd prefer if you call me sister rather than brother.
Oh. How about brethren? Because that's pretty generic. Can't you identify as a brethren? So calling brother and sister, thank you.
I'm sorry.
Put me on blast.
I'm sorry.
Sister. I've always asked, why can't we say, if it's brethren, why can't we say sister? And everybody's like, bad idea. But one of the first things, they didn't know me from Adam. I messaged the Interchange and said, hey, I would love to talk to you about what you're doing, what you're planning on doing. And then I got a wild hair and decided to just drive over here on one of the cruddiest, rainiest, iciest days, and just happened to be, came in, ordered, didn't say a word about who I was or what I was looking for.
Sat right over there.
Sat right over here and ate. Wanted to get a feel for what this was, because quite frankly, there were a lot of people saying they were going to do a lot of things to defy the governor, and I'm like, let's see. And it just happened to be one of the days that I was here that the state showed up to serve her paper. And I didn't get it on video, but I saw it happen. And I finally got up and went over and started talking, and that's when we met the first time. And then we communicated more, and we did our interview. I call them conversations most of the time, because that's what they end up being. And I asked her, how far are you willing to take this? You know that you could lose everything and go to jail. Are you willing to do that? And she said, to her credit, absolutely. And so now the question that all of you have to ask yourselves, okay, here, how many of you are on social media of some form? And I'm not asking you to divulge what it is.
How many of us are?
Yeah. I'm not asking you to divulge what it is, but how many of you have seen that meme, and Lisa's heard me use this reference before, I think. How many of you have seen that little meme that's going around that says, Rosa Parks got on the bus and all she said was no? Have you seen that?
I love that.
Isn't that powerful?
I love that.
Isn't that powerful? It's bogus. That's absolutely bunk. You want to know why? Because Rosa Parks didn't just get on that bus and say no. Rosa Parks, and you get emotional, Rosa Parks got on that bus because she knew she was going to say no. And when what she knew going in to get on that bus and sit in the front and not move, because all she had to do was move to the back, right? It was go to the back. And it wasn't ma'am, I guarantee you that.
Right.
Or madam, or miss. When they asked her to move to the back of the bus, all she had to do was go. She didn't have to say yes, she didn't have to say anything, all she had to do was go. But Rosa Parks got on that bus, and she didn't just say no. She got on that bus knowing she wasn't going to move, knowing that she was going to say no, knowing that there was a high probability that that bus wasn't going to move, that law enforcement was going to come and arrest her, and that her life was at risk. Now, let me ask you a question. How hard is it going forward knowing that, to think that maybe you might get asked to move away from the school without having to really worrying about going to jail or getting assaulted? But the deeper question is that there's 10, 20, 30, 40 of you, and they come down there and they say, the school district has asked us to remove you from the property, and if you do not leave, we will be forced to arrest you. Ask yourself right now, am I willing to go?
Absolutely.
I am.
Okay.
I've thought about it.
Yep.
Now, if you haven't thought about it, you need to. But see, that's what civil disobedience. Am I advocating? I don't want you to get arrested. It should never come to that. It should never come to that. And I've made the comment before, if enough of us show up, they can't arrest us all. I got news for you. Kurt Freitag is not going to put 60 of you in there.
No, we haul some to Owatonna and some to Blue Earth.
You've thought this through.
My point is if you guys start, and this is why, and Lisa knows, I've also been pushing on Owatonna and Albert Lee and others. So like government entities have what they refer to as a mutual aid agreement, right? So if your city's getting inundated with like a riot, you can pick up the phone and call the local sheriff's office or the local police department, and they're like, okay, we're on our way. And it's the same thing with fire departments, whether they be professional or volunteer, right? If you got this major 5-alarm fire, or whatever they call them now, and there's buildings out of control and other buildings are in danger of burning, and you have all of your pump trucks and all of your firefighters out there, and you can't keep it under control, like, is that Alden Conference close? May send their volunteer fire department to you to help, or to cover other things that are going on, right? So that you can focus on that. What you guys have got to do, on top of it, making sure you're recording, as uncomfortable as it is, and asking the hard questions and putting them in the spot, saying, are you sure you really want to violate my constitutional rights, my constitutional liberty? You sure want to do that? All that's uncomfortable, but then you also have to start reaching out to these other cities and these other groups. Owatonna, Austin. I guarantee you there's somebody in Austin thinking like this. But do they know that you're over here thinking like this? Reach out to Rochester. There are people in Rochester who will show up over here. There's a couple who has been here and recorded city recorded city council meetings.
I have a question. Now, when you're saying reach out, before this protest,
Well, you reached out to me and I couldn't make it, so
yeah,
I
no,
wanted to talk.
But I mean, you know, it was our first attempt at it, and it was suggested that we, before we had this protest, that we not put it on Facebook, and we had our emails sent out, etc. Unfortunately, there was someone, not in this group, but they,
We're on the email and text.
they heard of it, and that's all, they knew we were coming.
Okay.
And so my question is, how do we, I'm in a lot of Minnesota groups, and I do follow what's going on in Owatonna and Rochester, etc. But how do we, especially on a short notice, how do we reach out to those folks?
Well, unless something's absolutely emergent, like you find out that they're coming to arrest Lisa again tomorrow, like there's really no reason for anything to be that short notice. Other than the coffee tasting today, which Lisa and I didn't plan until after we talked. But my point is that we better be planning better than that. And so like you guys need to get motivated in your own personal social media accounts and be reaching out to people who you might know here in town, or even your neighbor who's like, what's going on with the school district? This is stupid. I'm aggravated. What are they doing? Like, you can be having those conversations well ahead of time and saying, oh, by the way, we're going to have a group at the school district. You don't have to speak, but we need bodies. Now, they may not be part of the first crew holding the camera, but if you start packing that room, and ask the Owatonna group, United Patriots for Accountability, and then there's Citizens of Concerned Owatonnans for Public Education, COPE. They've all been working independently, but they're coming together. And a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago? No, maybe 2 weeks ago now. They had a school board meeting, and they've been asking for a change of venue for over a month and a half, almost 2 months. And we packed that room with we could have had 100 people in there. And the capacity was 70. And before the school board meeting ever started, there was arguments happening between, I'm not going to name any names about who might have had a YouTube channel that was fighting for these groups, but didn't get it on video because he didn't think he would need to before the meeting started. But where maybe this individual, I won't mention his name, was calling on paid staff members who weren't part of the school board to be the ones removed from the room and make room for the actual people who wanted to come in there and observe, and that maybe the media should not be given a table where 3 or 4 of them could sit, and we should be making room for the citizens, right? That conversation might have happened. But what you guys need to do is start reaching out, because Owatonna's already come over here. They've sent people here for meetings. On at least one occasion, I don't remember if it was a school board meeting, they may have come for city council as well. Now, they may not have announced themselves and said, hey, I'm here to back you up, and I'm from Waseca, or I'm from whatever. But they've come. And so we have to be reaching out to one another for mutual aid. Because numbers breed numbers, right? Numbers breed numbers. People see, wait a minute, okay, I've been told these guys are freaks, or I've been told these guys are radicals, but they go and they're well-spoken, and they're eloquent, and some Sherry's nervous, but she does it, and you can hear it in her voice when she speaks. She's nervous, but she's doing it. That's courageous. Mm-hmm. It's not, like, it is not courage for me to go over to Owatonna and dress down in a confrontational but respectful way their school board president when he's doing something wrong. That's just because I've got that kind of personality. But Sherry's courageous. Lisa's courageous. Others of you in your own school district. Jessie, having her own fight. Or getting ready to have her own fight in that alphabet agency of the school district that she's in over there. NHREGSQ. Nearhague, yeah. Whatever it might be. Maybe if their school board meeting is on a night that you guys don't have anything going on, and if it's on a meeting night here, guess what you guys have? You have active training.
Right.
Is it fun to sit here and have these conversations philosophically about what we're going to do? Sure. But if all we're doing is talking about it, now we put feet, put legs to them. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, we're from Waseca, but my daughter-in-law, her daughter teaches in Mankato, and they're looking at the vax mandate. She doesn't know day to day if she's going to be employed or not. They started a very small group, but they're like 5 or 6 of them meeting.
Yeah.
But they need help over there.
Yeah, see, and that's, so you guys just heard this. So when I walk away from this and leave, the responsibility now is on each and every one of you to make sure that you know who you are, so that if one of those last minute situations comes up, or all of a sudden Mankato says, oh, we could use some people, or Waseca could use some people, you know who to reach out to. And you want to let people know, let me know. I'll put it out on Facebook. I'm not even afraid. And I know, we don't want to communicate to them what we're doing, because that's getting, well, if they know you're going to start showing up. I got news for you. Owatonna, the school board knows people are coming. We warned them, we're coming, and we're not going to stop coming. Guess what happened last week? Owatonna School Board made the decision to change their venue after 6 weeks.
Yeah. I was just going to ask you that.
And
Two bigger.
to a bigger venue that's going to seat at least 120.
Wow.
And guess what? We're going to try and fill that too. And we're going to fill this one up. Now, it may not happen right away, but it's got to happen because nerd shows up here.
We could just go to Richmond.
You guys just nerd. I'm just going to call nerd. Because nerd comes here. 2 or 3 of them. I mean, what do you got, like 5 people in town? All in your house. So you let you come here. And then when it's not here, and it's over there, or it's in Mankato, or it's in Waseca, look up the local mom and pop place that didn't get shut down, show up either before, have dinner, tell them thank you, and then go to the school board meeting. Or go to the school board meeting and then go have dinner after. Or you might need to stop and get a drink after you see some of the stuff that's happening.
So I wonder if we go to these meetings, okay, there's people standing there.
Yep.
Can we bring like maybe a little sign with us saying
Absolutely.
we're supporting?
Absolutely.
You know?
Absolutely. Now,
Because then they know why
now
we're
let's,
there.
but let's also make sure that we kind of know what the topic is for that day. So like I've had a couple of experiences over in Owatonna with people who come to speak, and I'm like, what are you talking? Like, I don't really understand, follow what you're saying. Right? And so that's the thing. Some people are good at speaking extemporaneously because they're just jabberjaws, and there again, I'm not going to name any names. But you might be sitting up here. But that's not really a gift. That's just, I don't want to shut up. But some of us are good at it because we've had to do it quite a bit. But if you're really considering speaking, especially under a time constraint, like 2 minutes, you better have talking points, and you had better practice the crud out of that thing. And ask Sherry, I will, if you send me, if you find me on Facebook, or Twitter, or send me an email, watch my videos and write down my email. It's tcpearson@protonmail.com. Lisa knows I will respond. There again, for some reason I have some time on my hands. That may not last very long, but hopefully. But I'll respond. And I'll tell you the truth. Won't I, Sherry?
Yep.
If I think you said something that you shouldn't say, or I think something needs to be tweaked, I'll give you some ideas. Now, is it up to you to make those decisions for yourself? Absolutely. And if you're a good writer, and you just want to have somebody read it to make sure it flows, and which you should do, it's just like sending that email at work when you get mad, right? Type it, put it in your drafts, reread it, retype it, put it in your drafts, reread it, retype it, and then send it to the person at work that you trust, or print it out and let them read it. Don't necessarily send it, because that can always end poorly. But it's the same thing. Make sure that on top of all this other preparation that you've been doing, if you're going to start showing up at these meetings and you're going to speak and you're going to have something to say, make sure it's germane, make sure it's on point, because that's the thing. School boards, city councils, county commissions, public, anything, okay, are they required, if you just had to answer based on your normal knowledge, are they required to allow you to speak?
No.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, they're not.
Oh, they're not.
No. That's why I asked, because I knew there was going to be some conflicting views.
Once they've started it, then they have to.
Not necessarily.
No.
No. If it's on the forum, or if the forum's on the agenda, they have to allow it.
They don't have to put it on the.
But they do not have to put it on the forum, and they can change their policy and procedure at any time.
Oh.
Now, there again, it's a public meeting, so it has to be done in public meeting. So if you're sitting there, and you shouldn't be just going to the meetings for the forum and then leaving, by the way. If you're gonna go to a meeting, you go to the meeting and you stay.
That's a good point.
Let the leftists that are gonna go to the meeting to show that they support the school board, let them go to the public forums and speak, and then leave. You stay, because you know when the work happens. First, it happens where, Lisa?
At the work session.
That's city council, county commission, and school boards, and library committee. It's the work session where this stuff happens. You need to start showing up at work sessions. And guess what you need to have at the work sessions? Video. And then you go for the public forum, and when the public forum's done and all the loopy-loos are like, I heard it's going to be violent, they leave, you stay, you keep recording. Because if they want to change any of this stuff, it's got to be done in public. And then if all of a sudden they say, well, there is no public forum, then somebody who's got some brass tacks needs to stand up and say, what do you mean there's no public forum in a regular meeting, because it's been going on? Well, we're not required. Well, you're not required, but it's in policy and procedure that you will allow it. So I'm not saying you have to allow it, but I would like an explanation why. Well, we're not required to tell you. Absolutely you're not. But guess what you've got now? You've got several weeks of meetings where 5, 10, 15, 20 of you have all recorded that there's a public forum, and now all of a sudden we're not doing it anymore. Why? Who looks bad there? Even if they haven't changed it, and they're not going to give you an answer, right? Because what do we know, Lisa? Now tonight for the public forum, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to ask you to use decorum. We're going to ask you to not curse. We're going to ask you to not make any public or any attacks on any individuals, no slander, no libel, no divulging of public information. Which, by the way, when they ask you for your address, what is that?
No.
That's a no, because that's public information. You got somebody like Lisa who's got a target on her back, and now they got a video with her street address on it.
Yeah.
Right.
That's public information. But you can't divulge somebody else's public information? But you got to give yours to speak? No, you don't. I know this is a lot of stuff, but I don't get over here very much. Because I have to get in and out under the radar. So
This has been really good. Maybe take, a couple more
So
questions?
what do you say then when they ask for your address? You say, I don't want, not going to divulge that?
you're not entitled to that
Or
information.
not,
Fourth
not,
Amendment.
With
not
all due
entitled to
respect,
that
you're not
information?
entitled to that information.
No, Fourth Amendment protects your rights on that.
What was that?
You don't even need to cite that. You don't even need to get into that with them. Just go, with all due respect, you're not entitled. So may I begin?
Okay.
And you do not, your time doesn't start until you start speaking, not answering questions. And if they interrupt you, and that's the other thing, have one person who has a timer. Because if you aren't timing every single person's time, they will short the people they don't want to talk. And you will feel like, oh man, that 2 minutes went fast. You might find out it was 1 minute and 30 seconds. Well, oh, your time's up. Oh, okay. Because we're Minnesotans, right? Not Lisa, though. She walks away, still talking. She walked out of the room 2 hours later, still talking.
I think it's also important to time yourself when you're up at the
Yep.
microphone. So that's what I do now.
Yep, absolutely. Go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, I've got a doctor friend that's over in Hastings, and she's been doing a ton of research on masking and COVID and all that. She spoke at the Hastings School Board meeting. They gave her 5 minutes and very eloquently spoke. And I asked her how it went, and the whole thing was recorded. And she said it was decided before I got there. She said I totally wasted my time.
And
She said the decision was made before I arrived.
Lisa and I have talked about this before too, and this is why we started talking. And she had already started doing this, but we had talked about this, and I've talked about this with you and a lot of people. They're like, go to the work sessions? Yeah, but here's the deal. Even at the work sessions, they're not gonna, especially when you start showing up, they're not gonna talk about business. They're gonna talk around business. So Otana had this issue last night. They had some public image consultants in, and like right there in front of the people, like the public image consultants must have been just, like, they're public image consultants. Let's just think about this as a firm dedicated to helping elected servants and appointed servants, boards and commissions figure out how to handle things. Looked at the school board members last night and said, and I quote, "You need to stop talking about accountability and transparency in front of people on video." And that's why work sessions are important. Okay, so, and this is all very important. Civil decorum. That doesn't mean if somebody tries to shut somebody down, or and they, like Lisa gets up to speak on Monday, or Nikki gets up to speak on Monday, and you start to say, and we demand that Mr. Funk, I'd actually refer to him by his first and last name. Let's
I
not
would
give
never
him
call
any,
him superintendent.
don't give them any
No,
kind of
no.
official title
No.
in this situation, because they're your employee.
Exactly.
Want to use decorum and be civil, but refer to them by name, and then when Clot tries to shut you down, somebody had better have the cojones to stand up and say, "Stop, Mr. Clot. This citizen is speaking, and you will not interrupt them. Now give her her time back." Now, Lisa's first time she got shut down, she did fight for herself. And quite frankly, y'all ladies need to find some men. And this is what I'm going to end with, okay? Y'all ladies need to find some men. Not that you guys can't do this, but I want to know, no offense, sir. or you guys over there. But I want to know where all the men are.
At work.
Sort of work.
No.
Mine's at work.
No offense to your husband, but somebody's got to make a freaking sacrifice one of these days.
He'll be off this winter.
But
Well, there are other.
I'm
men
not
in
trying,
this
but there are
town.
other men. There are other men. And if we have to, hey, Mom, can you, or hey, Barb, or Karen, no, don't give your kids to a Karen. No offense to any Karens here. But can you watch my kids, please? Like, if it's a friend, they're gonna understand. But Joe and Sue are going to the school board meeting tonight, and Joe's gonna speak. Not because Joe's more important, but you know what I'm tired of seeing? Where are all the men? And I don't mean Eric Mortensen and Mike Murphy or Mike Marty or Neil Shaw or anybody else. Where are the guys?
We've had this
You are a blessing, sir, for handling the text messages.
Yep.
Yep.
I mean that. It's a blessing. Okay? But here's and I told the son who walked out of the ice cream shop. So, and it closes at 9. So now I'm under a time constraint. You're a blessing for handling that. You live here in town?
Yep.
Have you spoken at a meeting?
Yep.
Awesome.
He's been
Boy, did he.
No, but my point, okay, so why aren't there 10 more of them?
Yeah.
Like, I don't believe that every one of you ladies is single. Like, some of you might be, but I don't believe that every one of you is single, or doesn't know some guy who might be passionate about this. Go to a good church. You go to a good, and I mean a good church, not necessarily like TC's perfect idea of a church, because I am a Reformed Calvinistic Baptist going to a Presbyterian church. You aren't going to find those kind of people very often. But you go to a good church, where's your pastor? Where are the elders? Where are the
Amen.
deacons?
Amen.
Where are they? And if you're not talking to them about being there, and if you do talk to them and they say, well, you know, we've got to maintain a certain, no. Hogwash. You know who led the charge for the liberation of the of the colonies?
Yes.
Yep.
The Black Robe Regiment.
Yep.
Make any sense right now?
Yep.
Could we maybe take one of these meetings on a Sunday to church and do this?
You find a pastor that's willing to let my loudmouth into his church, and I'll come. But I guarantee you, if you tell them, hey, we got this guy, we'd like to have him come speak, they're going to watch my channel, and most of them are going to go, no.
No.
You know why? Because I'm scared. And I don't mean...
And partly because the churches, and I'm just going to say this, I'm saying some are owned.
Yep.
Because they are allowing themselves to be owned. And we will not be owned anymore. That's what this is all about, is we're tired of being owned by the government. We own the government. It's time for us to stand up. It's time to make the sacrifice. It's time to do whatever it takes to take back our country.
Yep.
We're not playing anymore.
No.
This is serious stuff.
So, and I'm with Lisa, and I don't want to cut you off, I really don't. I'm going to use the restroom.
No, you
and
should.
I'm going to go get ice cream.
Yeah, we should.
You all can stay here and talk. I'll leave. I think there's still some coffee left in the pots. I'm going to take the rest of the coffee with me because I got another test.
How are you going to get your vote?
Lisa will send it to me in a text because we text a lot.
All right.
And I will text that other information. But here's the deal. You find a church that's willing to let me in on a Sunday, I'll show up. I'll talk. I mean that. You find somebody, I'll do it.
You think they welcome a group
You would
like
think,
this
but
to
if you
do
find
this.
it, I'll show. Lisa knows that. I will make the effort. But the other part of that is too, but you got to start having those conversations. You need to start asking your pastors, the deacons, the elders, what's going on, and why aren't you coming to the meetings? That their answer is, well, we don't want to ruin our image. I got news for you. If the only thing you're worried about is ruining your image, and this isn't just for your church, this is for you. If you're worried about looking bad, and I sound really angry right now, it's because it's kind of, I lost my career.
Yes.
Because of the people in this city, not you guys, but because the people that think they run this city, I lost my career. If you knew, and you'll find out, if you knew the things that they did to me, to get that, to make that happen, there wouldn't be a day that went by that you weren't sending an email to your city council and to your mayor and to your chief of police and to the city attorney. They used their power to come after me. And it worked for a short period of time. So if I sound angry, you have got to start doing this. And you have got to reach out to your neighbors. And I'm not talking about violence, I'm not talking about hurting anybody, I've never advocated for that. But it is time that you guys got angry. We are one generation away from losing this republic.
Amen.
It's your kids and your grandkids. That's it. Some of you have grandkids, some of you have kids, and some of them are in the school district and some of them aren't. One generation away. And if you aren't willing to stand up now, and you're not willing to start making those decisions and sending those emails and staying on every day, not, well, I sent it and I never heard back, every day, until they're so tired of it that they try to threaten you with harassment. Don't harass them.
How do you know when you're going overboard? Sometimes I think I go overboard.
Well, you and I had a kind of that conversation today, didn't we? A little bit. And I'll tell you. But there's nothing wrong with 4 people sending an email on Monday and 4 more sending an email on Tuesday and then 4 more on Wednesday and Thursday. And then just taking turns so that it's not the same person. And that's why I said earlier, don't make it the same email every time.
And I have utmost respect for you because I lost my job as a correction officer and it was bogus. And at the time, my personal life was just in disarray. Pregnant children, sons running amok, losing our home.
You mean somebody in the law enforcement world's kid was acting nuts?
Yeah.
I was fortunate. I got through my life with my kids. That didn't happen. So.
And I didn't fight. It was too much, and I just gave up. And I've regretted it ever since. And that's why I was drawn to your story also. Of late, it took a lot to put it out there. And so much has happened, like with Lisa first and with other people I'm meeting, and it's like, no. Because if we don't, you're exactly right.
Is it hard? Yeah. Is it worth it?
Yes.
Yes.